guys, Mark here, and I know we're in the thick of iPhone month, but I actually got my hands on the Galaxy S20 FE from Samsung just before the iPhone 12s came out, and I really don't want to wait any longer to review it because this is a really good phone, and I've been excited to talk about it ever since it showed up on my doorstep. So Samsung has been showing up all year with some pretty hard-hitting phones that I really liked. The S20, the Note 20 Ultra, the Z Fold 2, all three of those phones were pretty darn great, but they all had one thing in common. They were really expensive. The S20 was a bit more affordable at $1,000 US, at least comparatively to the $1,300 Note 20 Ultra and the $2,000 Z Fold 2. The S20 FE, or Fan Edition, is a different story. It's got an MSRP of $699 USD, and for that price and the specs that this thing is packing, it's an easy recommendation. It does make a few cuts to get that price down to $699, but I think Samsung made all the cuts in all the right places, which we'll talk about in just a sec. First, just a disclaimer, this phone was provided to me by wirelessplace.com, your source for all Samsung unlocked phones. They're not sponsoring this video and they have no power to influence this review in any way, but if you want to pick up an S20 FE at the end of this video, I'll have a link to their store in the description down below. The S20 FE comes in a plethora of different colors, and the one they sent me is cloud white. I kind of wished I had a red or a blue version at first, but now that I have this white one on hand, I love it. It's a very clean looking phone, and if you catch the light in the right way, it has this pink sheen to it. A couple of things to note about the build of this phone. First of all, the back of this phone is not glass, it's plastic. And that's one of the things that Samsung has chosen to do in order to get that price down. And I think it's a great move. If you guys have been watching this channel for a while, you know that I actually really do enjoy seeing plastic backs on phones. They're much less prone to breaking when dropped, they're cheaper to manufacture, and they make the phone a lot lighter than if they had glass. The cloud white doesn't even look like plastic, to be honest. They have a matte coating on here for fighting the good fight against those fingerprints, and it looks very clean no matter what light you have on it. The only real downside to a plastic back for me is that it makes the haptic feedback and vibration made by the FE feel a little bit cheap and hollow, but that's not really a big deal. Samsung even made sure that the FE is both IP68 rated for water and dust resistance, which is great. The camera module on the back doesn't stick out nearly as much as other recent Samsung phones either. We'll talk about the triple camera system in a bit, but for now, let's flip the phone over and talk about the display. The S20 FE has a huge 6.5-inch Super AMOLED 1080p display that runs at a high refresh rate of 120 Hz, and it looks fantastic. There were obviously a couple of cost-cutting measures taken here too, but again, they're all in the right places. First of all, this is a 1080p panel instead of 1440p like we see on the S20 and Note 20 Ultra. Not a big deal since neither of those phones can run at both 1440p and 120 Hz at the same time anyway. The display on the SE is also flat, which I actually prefer, but some of you probably don't. The bezels on this phone are also completely asymmetrical. The sides are the thinnest, the top is a little bit thicker, and then the bottom is the thickest. Of course, this doesn't actually matter. No one is actually gonna care about that, except for me. Everything else about the display, aka the stuff that actually matters, is great. It has excellent colors and contrast from the AMOLED nature, and the high refresh rate makes using the phone a very fluid experience. Underneath the display sits what has become a Samsung staple at this point, an optical fingerprint reader. Well, actually that's not entirely true since a lot of their flagship phones come with an ultrasonic reader under the display instead of optical. Either way, I find the optical ones to be a little bit slower and less accurate too, but it's totally fine for most of the time. It's also great to have a fingerprint reader in times where we have to mask up to go out in public. Face ID on the iPhones aren't really cutting it right about now. The speakers on the FE are great too. It doesn't seem like cutting down on speaker quality was a part of Samsung's cost-cutting strategy. They actually sound a little bit better than my iPhone 12 Pro in terms of clarity with the mids and highs. Of course, it's a phone speaker, so you're not going to get much bass at all, but if you're in a pinch without headphones, the speakers shouldn't disappoint you. All right, let's talk about those cameras. On the back of the FE, there's a 12 megapixel wide, an 8 megapixel telephoto, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. This does seem a little cut down from the huge 108 megapixel wide from the Note 20 Ultra, and even the 64 megapixel telephoto camera on the S20. But in real world usage, the photos and videos coming from the rear cameras are pretty decent. I feel like Samsung has come a long way this year in the camera department. I used to frequently put them pretty far behind the Pixels and iPhones that came out in the same year, but Samsung is catching up pretty quickly. I love the colors in the images coming from this phone, and all the photos seem pretty sharp. The video is what seems to suffer a little bit more in the FE. It feels a little bit more compressed than the videos from other Samsung phones, and the stabilization is definitely not the greatest, especially on that 32 megapixel front-facing camera. But overall, like I said, the cameras on this phone are pretty decent. Okay, I feel like we've gone a little bit too long without talking about the guts of this phone, so let's do that now because that's one of the biggest selling points of the FE. Even though this phone is priced well under Samsung's flagship phones, we're still getting some pretty top-tier specs here. Depending on where you buy the FE, it either comes with a Snapdragon 865 or an Exynos 990 between 6 and 8 gigs of RAM and either 128 or 256 gigs of UFS 3.1 storage. For a phone that's priced at $699, that's really competitive, and this phone flies through pretty much everything. The 120Hz refresh rate makes everything super fluid, especially gaming, and there really hasn't been a time where I've noticed that the FE took a dip in performance. That said, this version I have here is actually the Exynos 990 International version, and I've heard that the Snapdragon model is actually faster in performance and is more efficient when it comes to battery life. So if you're in a region that sells the Snapdragon version, I'd get that one if I were you. Okay, battery life. The S20 FE comes with a pretty big 4500 milliamp hour battery no matter which version you get. On my Exynos model, I'm getting a screen on time of around 5-ish hours before needing to recharge. Not amazing, but again, the Snapdragon model is supposed to be a lot better, so if 5 hours of screen on time is all you need and you intend to go for the FE with the 865, you're not going to have any issues. Surprisingly, Samsung didn't make many cuts when it comes to charging the phone either. The phone can still wirelessly fast charge at up to 15 watts, fast charge via USB-C at up to 25 watts, and reverse wireless charge another device like my Galaxy Buds Live at up to 4.5 watts. I have genuinely enjoyed using this phone, and that's not something I say at the end of every review. I have to send this phone back to Wireless Place shortly, and I think I'm just gonna miss it. It's a fast phone with a high refresh rate display. It's durable because of that plastic back. It looks great. The cameras are decent. Honestly, this is one of the few phones I've used that I have very little to complain about. The S20 FE is just such an easy phone to recommend. That said, you might want to keep your eyes peeled for more deals as we get closer to the holiday season. You know how Samsung is when it comes to discounting their phones. If the regular S20 goes on sale for around the same price as the FE, you might want to take a more serious look at that one. There's also the Pixel 5, which I have yet to review because Google is really slow at shipping pre-orders to Canada, but that also looks like an excellent phone for the same price. Either way, I don't think you can go wrong with the S20 Fan Edition. Samsung killed it with this phone. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to support my channel, and as always, have a great day.